Coming up, we're going to go through the Xbox Series X and S, Microsoft's fastest selling Xbox console to date for the generation, despite all of the restraints on supplies. Let's get into the episode right now. All right, Court and Steve, let's get into the article coming over from Eurogamer. Microsoft Xbox Series X and S are outpacing sales of previous Xbox consoles generations, despite the fact that supplies have been unable to meet demand. Phil Spencer was doing a lot of interviews, and he was talking with the New York Times, and Xbox boss Phil Spencer and Microsoft had, quote, at this point, sold more of this generation of Xboxes, which is Xbox Series X and S, than we had any previous version of Xboxes. Eurogamer continues on by saying, on the surface, this may not be too surprising. Microsoft has effectively doubled its chances this generation with two very different console models, each of which offers its own proposition. This was not the case with the launch of the original Xbox, the 360, or the Xbox One. Yeah, it's a microwave they sold. But Spencer went on to say that the Xbox X and S had achieved this fastest selling feat despite the much reported supply shortage hitting chip manufacturers, production delays due to the COVID, and various global distribution bottlenecks. Quote, when you think about trying to go get an Xbox or a new PlayStation right now on the market, they're really hard to find, Spencer continued. And it's not because supply is smaller than it's ever been. Supply is actually as big as it's ever been. It's the demand is exceeding the supply for all of us. So it's our job to get the supply there and meet the demand. Spencer concluded that Microsoft's now spent, quote, a lot of time solving logistical issues such as how, quote, how do we move consoles from A to B location and securing chips. He also touched on another recent problem, scalping. How do you actually manage so that real customers are buying our consoles and it's not a bunch of scalpers and bots that are securing capacity? It's a multi-step and it's kind of a 24/7 job for the team right now. That's coming over from Eurogamer. Steve, your thoughts on Xbox X and S being fastest selling console to date? What do you think?
Well, I think you said it right at the top of the show. It's kind of outstanding given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? So I think Eurogamer kind of touches on it that the demand is so high that they just can't keep up with the supply. But right now, Microsoft finds itself in a very great spot where they're coupling new consoles, brand new shiny things on store shelves with Game Pass, with a pretty good lineup of games that came out last year, right? So it's understandable that people want to go out and buy the consoles. And I think, in hindsight now, it was very smart for them to come out day and date and say, we have a high tier console and then a way more affordable console as well. So there's a lot of options for people this year. And of course, I think it's just great for the Xbox ecosystem that, it's selling well.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the Xbox Series S was probably the number one thing under Christmas trees this year. Mm-hmm. I went from being able to see them in the wild and joking with Matt all the time, like, oh, they got them at Walmart, they got them at the source, to didn't see them in the wild since Christmas, and it looks like a lot of people bought them. And I do think Game Pass has a lot to do with that. I have a lot of friends that have been PlayStation people forever, and they're like, oh, I got that S you were talking about, and I got Game Pass, and I don't turn on my PlayStation anymore. I have a friend who got a PS5 and an Xbox Series S, and he turned to me, and I was over there the other day because our daughters are friends, and he's like, I don't play my PlayStation 5 anymore. He's like, I don't turn it on. And he was like, because of Game Pass, because a lot for certain demographics, such as myself, our money needs to be spent in different areas. So when I've already paid for a subscription service, I'm just going to stick to it and not buy that $90 game. I understand the whole owning your game. I think it changes because I used to be in that. I want my game. I want to own it. I have it. Now I get to the part I'm like, well, it's almost like all my media with my MP3s or my movies, everything's digital, and that's where I gravitate towards.
Yep.
But because if you look at what the year's about to happen, like the rough estimate is they're saying that they've sold 12 million consoles, 12 million in sales. That's what, not consoles, sorry, 12 million sales is what the number is looking like right now when they do their estimates. And they were also saying that the PS5 has sold more, but they say the install base is less. So they're saying that people are still sitting on these consoles. If I go on Facebook Marketplace or such right now, you're still having PlayStation 5 sitting there. because it's still more expensive, right? Even here in Canada, if you bought an X or a PS5, the PS5 was more expensive. So I'm looking at what's going to come. I think these numbers are great, and I wanted to get your guys' opinion on what the year is going to be. We know what PlayStation's about to do. PlayStation's about to have Gran Turismo, Horizon, and God of War, unless God of War gets pulled back. But I think it's coming.
Sure.
But you're about to have the year that we just saw from Xbox, from PlayStation, without the service. But you know Xbox has got things on the horizon. What do we think is going to happen with these sales? Are we going to see a trend that this is going to continue?
Steve?
It very well could be. I mean, there is a lot of unknown going into 2022. I mean, it's not hard to imagine that a lot more games are going to be delayed because of this ongoing pandemic and stuff like that, and all the hardships that come from that. But that being said, I mean, we do have Starfield coming out this fall. That's going to be a major win for Microsoft, especially around the holiday time, where there's going to be another push for console sales. But up until then, I mean, we don't really have an idea of what major game or what major partnerships, third-party partnerships, are going to be able to sell the console. So I think it's really up in the air right now. I think we'll have a better understanding maybe around June, around like the E3 kind of time, but this first half of the year, I think, is all just going to be leftovers from, the Halo hype, the Forza hype, and it's just going to kind of be Microsoft's messaging of saying, like, look at everything we have on the console right now come into our ecosystem thanks to Game Pass.
I think that's the big thing too, right? Is we're not seeing anything massive for the first half of the year. I think once we get past, like you said, June, July, we're going to see Xbox ramp it back up again. Could be totally wrong, because for all we know, in February, March, they announced another studio acquisition. I think the Ubisoft piece is huge. And I think I think the faster they can get Ubisoft Plus out to the market this quarter, maybe into Q2, I think that's what Xbox needs. If they're like, we have amazing momentum, we have incredible sales right now, it's all ding, ding, ding. I think if they're sitting on like, well, we don't have anything kind of big, flashy to really announce for the first half of the year, I think Ubisoft Plus is another one that they can say, here's another service and you love Assassin's Creed, you love Far Cry, you love all these games. It's now available on your console. That's going to drive those sales even more. And people saying, we need to get an S. That's the other thing I want to get your opinion on, guys, is do you think that there is a larger market out there? We are in an echo chamber of gamers that know every little detail of what's going on. There is such a massive, like Court's saying, like the demographics out there of families and just my older brother just being like, yeah, I want to pick up an Xbox, like, because I want to play Halo, he might say, and that's it. Or he wants to play MLB The Show because he's super, super casual. He wouldn't know or care about console versus console. He just sees the Xbox. Do you think that the sales are going to continue to rise even despite like shortages, as they say? What do you think they're going to do, or how do you think Microsoft's going to do on the console side of things going into 2022?
Court, I'll let you.
Yeah, with regards to the S, I'm, like I said before, I'm still in shock on how many people that were always been PlayStation, or people that didn't play video games, because video games have become part of the norm. 10 years ago, people weren't talking about video games like pop culture. I think a lot has to do with the Harry Potter movies and Marvel becoming so huge in the movie aspect that it started bleeding over into video games, because video games became cool again. Mm-hmm. Like they were in the 80s when they first came out on Nintendo. That's all you could talk about. And then it sort of like died off a bit. And now it's become part of pop culture. Video games, everybody talks about it. You've got Henry Cavill talking about The Witcher and saying what other video game he wants to do in a movie. So the Xbox Series S, I think, is perfect for that younger person who couldn't afford the bigger console, especially because I've played it, and that you still get 60 frames per second. It's at 1080p. It still looks beautiful. Not everybody has a 4K television. Not everybody has all these bells and whistles. So if you're able to still get 1080p, 60 frames per second, it's amazing. So you're going to think it's next gen. It's going to be an upgrade from whatever you were playing on previously. Yep. So I think the S is going to continue to do very well this year, but I have a hard time looking at the future of the S when people start getting the newer TVs and all those kind of things. But I think that's what Xbox is fine with. It's just going to be that other console. Like, I'm going to use it to carry it around, but eventually they'll want people to get both. Like, it's smart.
That's the thing I see. I mean, the Series S is a great entryway to the Xbox ecosystem, obviously because of the price point, obviously because it goes so well with Game Pass and everything. But I'm really curious to see what everyone, or hear what everyone says about the Series S 2 years down the line because of the memory issue. And that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
I have a Series S. I love it as a backup console for when I just want to move it around or just, just have it around. But that being said, I mean, you can only put, like, if we're being honest, 4 AAA, like, large scale games on it if you're lucky. So I do really want to know what the targeted demographic for the Series S is saying 2-3 years down the line when they are, hugely invested in Forza, Halo, maybe another Gears of War comes out, and then they're like, well, now I can't even put anything on my console because you have, Microsoft's 3 tentpole titles on it, and what else can I do? Now I have to either invest in buying a Series X, or do I get the memory? Like, what's the next steps here? But that being said, going back to, like, the original point, it's still going to sell very well because of that attractive price point, right?
It's a gateway console almost. It's almost like selling it on the street. Like, it's that thing that gets you. You buy one and then you're like,
get a little taste of it.
Yeah, you get a little taste. And like, so you have people, hopefully when their cloud gaming gets better, because let's be honest, it's not the best yet. I've tried it. Sure. It wasn't the greatest. Depends on your internet. If that gets better, then the S even becomes more and more and more attractive. Like, Matt, you want it for your living room. You're like, it's the perfect thing for my kids. They started getting more kids games with the outright game stuff coming on there. It's very interesting, and it's also, Jeff Grubb was just on XEP with Luke Lore the other day, and he made a comment, and I messaged Luke about it, and I told Matt about it. He made a very interesting comment. Xbox is putting a lot on Starfield to see what it'll do. If you look at Skyrim has been around for 10 years. It's been released 7 different times, and it has $30 million in sales across those 10 years. What if Starfield is that thing for Xbox? What if Starfield moves that needle and allows Xbox to be like, all right, we sold this many consoles, we got this many people to subscribe to Game Pass just on this game alone. If they compute those sales into people subscribing to Game Pass, they become the juggernaut service, and then they can go, oh, you know what? Those developers that we were thinking about buying, but we didn't know if the investment was going to be there because we wanted to see what the subscriber base is. Let's do it now. Yeah. And then if you're PlayStation, you're in trouble because you can't. They don't have the assets and the money that Xbox does. It's going to be tough. If it becomes a service industry, and the way Phil Spencer, if you read more into this New York Times article, he talks about how it is like that they're looking at a service. That's
right.
They want the conversation
Xbox should be on
with Game
PC.
Pass.
Yeah, you're looking with Age of Empires. Age of Empires, Phil Spencer wants that on console. He wants every Microsoft studio to release on all of their platforms. Yep. So Game Pass on the PC and Game Pass on the console. He's looking at everything. He really wants gamers to play everywhere. He wants us to be able to choose whether we play with PC players on multiplayer. He wants us to give us a choice.
Yeah.
And if Starfield is a banger, like a lot of people think it's going to be, we haven't seen much of it, but if it's the same as Skyrim and it becomes that game, it's going to be huge. It's going to be more important this year, and the release of Starfield is so important to Xbox. Yeah. It can't be underestimated.
Let us know in the comments below, what do you guys think about Xbox Series S and X sales? And, well, do you have the Series S, and how do you guys use it? Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Yeah, like, I'm seriously looking into getting another X.